Hello there, and welcome to the Untitled Film Podcast with Callum and Johnny. This week I am Johnny.
And this week I am Callum.
And welcome.
Oh, you're ripping people off now. But I did like your radio voice. Hello there, and welcome. You know, it's very professional.
Welcome.
Welcome. I'm going to ask some very benign questions.
I have really benign guests and things.
And all my guests are going to think that I'm a bit dim, but they're going to carry on politely because they know that this is a big opportunity to promote whatever thing they're doing right now.
Their agent says it's very important.
So they're going to smile and grit their teeth while I ask them invasive questions about their father leaving them.
Anyway, after that ragging on Dax Shepard.
Yeah, I don't know what he did to us.
Makes really bland podcasts.
He does have this weird thing because his dad left him, so he keeps asking other people, his guests, about their dads.
Oh, really?
It does get a bit odd after a while.
Interesting.
A bit invasive.
A bit like something we're going to talk about in our next episode of a podcast where there are always kindly dads that don't get their sons in every single one of their movies.
Yeah.
That's a spoiler for next week's episode and what we're going to be reviewing.
Yes. So, hint there. Quite a vague hint, but a hint.
And if people want hints about where and or what we might be doing next, or to see questions that they could answer and could be in episodes of podcasts, what kind of place would people do that, Callum?
They would have to go to Instagram or Facebook or even YouTube, and it was Untitled Film Podcast, one word, and we put out questions, we put out teasers for the next episode, we promote each episode, and it's good fun indeed. And we did put up a question for this one. This is a double record week, so it was a double question week. Not that anybody's answered them. But I
can't remember what they were.
Well, we are doing prestige television today. So I just put out quite a basic one this week because I'd already kind of spent on the last week. Ironically, we're recording this first. It gets complicated, don't worry. It's not the audience's burden. So all I asked was, what's your favourite prestige television and why? And if your answer is one of the two shows that we're about to review, keep your answer vague because I suspect that might know what your answer is. But just enlighten us. What would you say your favourite is?
One of the shows we're about to review is definitely up there. I would also like to put out that I have a really big soft spot, although I don't think it's perfect, for Mr. Robot.
Oh, good choice.
Really like Mr. Robot. I think it's quite different to a lot of prestige television. I just really like how it's shot. I like the soundtrack. Rami Malek's excellent. It's a really interesting story. I quite like things that parallel the real world, that aren't necessarily like in the real world, but kind of that fit beats that could work in the real world. Hence why I like one of the things we're going to talk about later on in the episode as well. There's lots of others I like. I've always been a Breaking Bad fan. Sopranos. The other show we're watching today I've always really liked. And I like Aaron Sorkin stuff anyway. I like Newsroom and things. There's got a lot of good prestige TV out there. How about you, Callum?
I want to fly the flag because my favourite was probably The Wire.
You were going to say that.
But, who hasn't spoken to death about The Wire?
That's why I didn't say it.
So I'm going to fly the flag instead for Deadwood because that was probably the show that got me into, like, a lot of the stuff that I am now. It's because of Deadwood. Deadwood was the first domino to fall. So I'm a bit of a character actor obsessive. I love seeing blokes with receding hairlines and craggy faces and ugly, but in that fascinating way. And at the time, I didn't know what a character actor was for Love Nor Money. Then Deadwood came along in 2004, and every actor on there was like someone who was quite famous in the 70s or 80s, really good in the 70s and 80s, and just hadn't had great work recently. Brad Dourif, Leon Rippey, William Sanderson, Robin Weigert, you name them, they're in Deadwood. Deadwood is packed to the brim with them. And I just remember it being a wake-up call. Like, I remember thinking, all these weird, creepy-looking old men, why am I so engaged in what they're doing and what they're thinking?
You do love a creepy-looking old man.
I do love a creepy-looking old man in a TV show and movie. I now giggle with glee when I see one of my favourite people. And this show is packed with them. It's full of them. And it introduced everyone to Garrett Dillahunt, who wasn't one then, but has since become one of the kind of this generation's craggly looking old men who do weird performances. So thank you, Deadwood. We love you. We love you, Deadwood, even if you don't have really a proper resolution, even with the TV movie.
After that really long and winding...
I thought it was quite sweet. It's quite personal for both of us.
If you say so. Anyway, on to something else that maybe be a bit brief this week, because we had to do 4 of them for Costa episodes, but on to the news. And what is your first piece of news today, Callum?
Well, my first bit of news is that there's a movie in the works called We Can Work It Out about the Beatles manager.
About Brian Epstein.
Yeah, so it's gone through, but the interesting part is the behind the scenes scuffles. It's gone through 3 directors now. It's on its third. No, sorry, it's on its third. So it's gone through 2 of them. It's on its third. So something is not right.
So that's always a really good sign and puts me very confident.
I know, and I just thought that I love it when you hear stories about this. So it started with UK director Joe Stevenson, Dr. Jekyll, the one with the Northern Irish actor whose name suddenly escapes me, and he took the reins, and then Sarah Sugarman, who did a lot of episodes of Vinyl, she left just before post-production began, and now we're on to Jonas Ackerlund, who did a TV show called Polar. So this is quite fascinating. I love it when things like this happen. And I couldn't care less about the story. I like the Beatles, of course, like everyone else does. But, I mean, it sounds like a generic rock, biopic. But I love it when you hear stories like this where films go through directors and they keep leaving and they keep dropping like flies because there's behind-the-scenes scuffles.
Yeah, arguments there's not enough money or the script is terrible.
Exactly.
Or the producer's a cunt or...
Exactly. All these things. Any of the possibilities that are running through your mind... It's probably one of them.
Or all of them sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Like with the Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yes, yeah, that was a big one.
It was indeed a big one. And that was even before Bryan Singer was a pervert.
Yes, and what's your big news for the week?
Quentin Tarantino.
Oh, I think I know him.
He has got a new movie that he's working on called The Movie Critic, which he said, I believe, is going to be his last movie. I don't know if I believe that when people say that kind of thing. I mean, how many times has Kevin Smith said something was going to be his last movie?
I know.
But we'll see on how many musicians. This is the last farewell tour.
I mean, the Rolling Stones can't stop doing farewell tours.
I know. Well, they're just like, the tax bill was a bit higher than I thought. I'm not going to be able to have the 7 swimming pools. I'll have to go down to 5. But anyway, it's called The Movie Critic, and he's been actually saying more things about it. So it'll be based on a real person, but not as he's been speculated, Paul Kael. Instead, it'll be someone far less known. Tarantino, speaking to Deadwood at Cannes, opened up to the explanation more about the character's inspirations. A critic who wrote for, by QG's description, a porn rag. Turns out Tarantino was really checking out such magazines for the articles.
Sure.
That's what Empire have to say anyway. He wrote about mainstream movies and he was the second string critic. He says, I think he was a very good critic. He was he was cynical as hell. His views were a cross between early Howard Stern and what Taxi Driver's Travis Bickle might be if he were a film critic. So yeah, that sounds quite interesting.
Actually,
It sounds a bit more like, it doesn't just sound like a pastiche, which is what he tends to do.
It sounds quite low key, more of a character study.
So that could be interesting because Tarantino is a bit up and down. Like he, I think unfortunately in his more recent films just has fallen into the worst of his indulgences. So like there's good in there, but it needs absolutely a script editor. It needs someone to go, Quentin, calm it down.
I quite liked Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but I spoke to someone at work and they said, oh my God, I just hated it. I hated every frame. And I felt really bad for the memory of the actress that died. Like that, Sharon Tate, that this is how she's being represented. And I thought it did a fairly okay job at trying to kind of be more of an honor to her. But I do understand that, and I think this might be a better material for doing the old-timey Hollywood.
It's kind of hard, isn't it? Because it's that kind of like revisionist history, and you're like, yeah, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they kill.
in this version they
Killed them
killed
instead
them.
of them
Yeah,
killing
exactly.
them.
But it is a hard tightrope to walk.
Yeah, it is a hard tightrope to walk, and it is like, is it insensitive? I personally don't necessarily think I can see how it's argued that way,
Yeah.
but I kind of think there's been enough time passed that, in a way, it's not.
And I know that Bruce Lee's daughter was very offended by the depiction of Bruce Lee.
in it. Yeah. But I quite liked it. But it was a mess and it was too long.
Yes.
Which is what every Quentin Tarantino recently.
Yes.
I quite like The Hateful Eight, but again, it's half an hour too long.
It is half an hour too long.
If not longer than half an hour too long. I quite like Inglourious Bastards, but again, it's half an hour too long.
Yes.
He
needs to know. I think it's Sally Menke, who was his longtime editor. She died,
Yeah, she did.
and he's never quite got the discipline back
No.
since then.
So this will be it.
Hopefully,
It's
it sounds like a character study. It could be that.
Is it his 10th movie he's saying as well? Because I think he's keep counting Kill Bill as
Does he count it as one? Yes, he does count it
He
as one.
counts it as
yes,
one.
He does. And Hateful Eight was his 8th film, famously. So maybe this is his 11th? Or is
one. No, it's 10th if you count
Oh,
Kill
okay.
Bill as one.
Yes.
So that's what he's saying. It's
Okay,
going to end
fair
on
enough.
10. Which is, it's a respectable amount. I quite respect that instead of like bashing 3 out a year like some directors
Yeah.
do.
Or flogging a dead horse
Exactly.
when moments pass.
Yeah, at least you can't say he's not original every time he does something. I know obviously it's kind of like it's always looking back at something and doing something, but it's still like, he doesn't do the same thing over and over and over again. He'll try his hand at something different.
Absolutely.
Anyway, Callum, what is your second piece of the news for the week?
Well, do you remember a while back I told you that Nicholas Lyndhurst was going to be in the Frasier reboot?
I think you did, yeah.
So this is just a little update on it. Not really much has changed. It's just that Kelsey Grammer hadn't really spoken about it before, and it just took everybody by surprise. Nicholas Lyndhurst is going to be in this big American...
Isn't it Lyndhurst? I'm sure it's pronounced Lyndhurst.
I'm sure it is. Maybe. Yeah, it probably is. Yeah, well...
Him.
Yeah, him. That fella. So really, this is just him sort of Yeah, it is Lyndhurst. So this is him just kind of updating. He spoke to the Times. He said, Nick and I fell in love when we were doing Man of La Mancha together at the London Coliseum in 2019. I warned them in America. I said, wait until this guy gets here. You'll be doing a scene with him and suddenly you realize he's just run off with it. He's an extraordinary actor, a dear friend, and I'm so pleased to be part of it. But it's more interesting that you get actors nowadays who may be famous in their home country for decades and years, and suddenly they're famous in America because that one streaming show or that one person who is a fan of theirs says, yeah, why don't we get Nicholas Lyndhurst?
Something that I'd be interested by to our American listeners, has Only Fools and Horses ever been something that's been on like BBC America or Hulu or something? Has it got any kind of following in the States? Because obviously a lot of that, you quite often, it's known as one of the, for those that don't know, it's known as one of the big British shows. It's one of the kind of, if you did a top 10 British comedy shows, that was always going to be near the top.
Yeah.
So obviously with that kind of stuff like Doctor Who's and I think Blackadder and a lot of things, they have, to have got a cult following. So I'd be interested to know if there's any cult following for Only Fools and Horses in the States.
That would be interesting to find out too.
So yeah, answers on a postcard.
Yeah, or in Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. My second piece of news is more. I think it's more amusing. Screen Rant put an article up this week about the status of Pirates of the Caribbean 6. So for those who haven't followed it, Dead Man's Tale, I think it was the last one.
A Dead Men Tell No Tales?
Something like that.
And then in the UK, it was called Salazar's Revenge for some reason.
Yeah, anyway, that one came out in 2018 and actually made Disney a ton of money.
Yes.
About $800 million. So, of course, what Disney like to do is make more money because that's how Disney work. Speaking of beating dead horses, of flocking dead horses. Anyway, and obviously Johnny Depp has had some problems, so they were going to reboot it with Margot Robbie as the lead pirate. Apparently the wheels came off that wagon, and they are now steaming ahead with 6. And there's some quite strong rumours that there could be a return for one Jonathan Depp.
Well, we'll see.
Obviously, he has started to rehabilitate his career.
Started to, and the film at
Rightly or
Cannes,
wrongly.
it didn't quite. It was supposed to be his kind of big comeback, and it didn't
Yeah.
quite. It didn't land terribly. It wasn't horribly reviewed, but it was a sort of nothing reviewed. 5 out of 10s, things like that.
He has had a few of these as well, because even I would go as far back as like Black Mass, where he'd done some real dogs,
and that was
his
supposed to
kind
be
of like,
his kind of Oscar.
oh, he's good again.
And again, he was good in that.
And that was obviously before all of the
Before
the Amber
everything,
Heard bits and pieces.
But even then, the reviews were they were soft, and the box office was. It wasn't bad, but it was like a lot of 6s and 7s out of 10s, like nothing. Although I will say this, Johnny Depp has had a lot of rumors that then come out to be not true, and some people start to suspect he's starting to put these out on his own. He was supposed to be in Beetlejuice 2, and while he technically could still be, he hasn't worked with Tim Burton for 10 years now. I would doubt they're working together again. I really would. I think they've fallen out. I don't think they're going to be talking about it, but I think they've had something's happened. He was supposed to be in Wednesday, first as Gomez, but then as Uncle Fester, and then that didn't happen. I think
Fred Armisen, in my opinion, is probably a better choice.
that was a much better choice. Yes, both choices were better choices. Luis Guzman, was a better choice. So I'm at the point now when I hear things with Johnny Depp, I go, okay, I'll believe it when I see set photos of him dressed as Captain Jack Sparrow with crew around him, or a Deadline article, because Deadline is the top boys. I'm not believing any other article until I see that.
Yeah. We shall see. I don't either. I don't necessarily believe it, but I kind of think it would.
Probably the only sensible move he can make, because it's the only franchise he has left that can make money.
I also think if Disney want to properly, often when they do, unless they completely reboot it and it's not Pirates of the Caribbean 6, it's a new series. I just don't see those films working without Johnny Depp.
I think a soft reboot won't work. They have to kind of completely retool it, or bring him back. They can't do the sort of thing where, oh, well, Jack's not around anymore, so you'll be following this new Pirates.
Exactly.
They couldn't do that.
And I think the argument is that, again, rightly or wrongly, and I think there's a big Channel 4 documentary coming out about the role of social media in the
it was TikTok was a lot of it.
Trial. But rightly or wrongly, he does seem to have been rehabilitated fairly in the public's eyes. So I do think there is a path back. I think, I don't see him getting any fancy new franchises, but if Disney want to have another go at making $600 million on a $200 million budget for a new Pirates movie, I feel like they probably
It certainly won't lose money like every other kind of blockbuster attempt that he's done between 2012 and when he stopped. But it's really the only path back he has.
It really is, rightly or wrongly. Anyway, on to the main event of the
Royal
episode.
Rumble. It's Prestige TV o'clock.
It really is. And this week we'll be talking about, as it is just finished, Succession. And we have watched the whole thing. We're going to be reviewing the whole of Succession.
So it's going to make the plot summary difficult, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess just summarise
I've got
episode
an idea
1.
how I'll do it.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
fair enough.
And then we will be reviewing season 1 of West Wing, although I might talk about it slightly broader as well, because I have seen...
Yes, you've seen more of it more recently. I actually haven't finished the West Wing. I saw, I think, up till about season 6. And then I just petered out, and that was years ago. So I've watched season 1 recently, and I haven't watched seasons 2 to 6 for many a moon.
Fair. So, let's start with Succession.
Yeah.
I'll give it a go because I think I've got an idea.
Okay.
Logan Roy is a media mogul. Already fucked it up. Is a media mogul. Think Rupert Murdoch, Robert Maxwell, Ted Turner, even a little bit of in there. And he runs a big Fox news company, along with a bigger business that has movie studios and theme parks and rocket ship companies and various things under its giant umbrella, and is one of the big titans of the USA. And he has 4 kids, 3 of whom are of his second wife and are fairly close to him from certainly a business point of view, and he would like one of them to succeed him. The older one, he's not so keen on succeeding him. and the three of them stab each other in the back, claw each other in the face, punch their dad in the back, and etc. And try to become that succession. By the end of the show, you find out who gets to be the succession. That's my
I
intro.
think that was an excellent job, considering you had to condense 39 episodes into 2 minutes.
Hour-long episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Or longer than an hour. By the last season, most of them are over an hour long, I think.
Yes, they were. But no, that was an excellent job. It took me a few whacks to get into this, as you know. I tried it first, and I was enjoying it, but I always felt there was a bit of distance. I felt a bit of chilliness between me and Succession, and I got up until about in the first run. Well, I got almost all the way through it, but I was watching it piecemeal, like a couple of episodes here, then stop for a while, and then pick up another couple of episodes. So I've forgotten plot points between them. So I'd be doing things like, who's he? What? Hey, who's that person? Fisher Stevens. How long has he been here? Oh, I guess he's been here for a while. Apparently he's been here for 20-something episodes. I don't remember him. Who's she again? And stuff like that. And so I said, okay, it's only fair if we're going to review this, because we've known for a few weeks now, binge it all. And it was in that binge where the magic started working. I suddenly felt it embraced me before it held me at a distance. And I think the thing is that the first time I watched it, it's like rich cunts do rich cunt things. It's very well observed. It's very well written, but I don't care about these people. And second go, I found my way in because I started to see just throughout their nastiness, throughout their insecurities, throughout their desperation to climb to the top, I started to see the vulnerabilities there. So Kendall Roy, played by the brilliant Jeremy Strong, has, in the arms of a lesser actor, his weak moments would seem too pathetic and passive, and his moments where he fights back would be seen as too aggressive. But throughout this, there's always a scared little boy there, and I started to see that, and you see that as well with Kieran Culkin as Roman, through all his bravado and swagger, and making crude comments. It's always like just they're children. And even though they're adult children, and then you start to remember they're from neglect. These are children of neglect, of abuse. Logan Roy is an abusive...
At minimum emotionally.
Yeah.
And arguably physically at times.
Arguably at times, physically. And their mother is just not there. She's chilly and distant. And...
British, some would say.
Yes, very British. And then you have supporting characters like Tom and Cousin Greg, who comes in, and he's kind of pathetic.
Also known as Callum.
Also known as me. I am Cousin Greg. And now I'm going to start saying and I'm going to be very conscious of all the ums I make, because that's Tom. And the interesting things about those characters is that they chose to be here. Greg and Tom, they chose this life. So one could conclude, even though on the surface they're more pathetic, they're more pitiable, in a way, there's evil in there that can't be excused away from, they're not the products of abuse. They're not the products of knowing that one of them will have to succeed, as these children have always known since they were children. They're just nasty pieces of work that come in. But I don't want to kind of overdo it on, and this character does this, and this character does this, which is the risk that you run when talking about prestige television. But the show is very good at, with one arm it pushes you away, and then aggressively it pulls you in when things happen that you go, oh whoa, that was incredible. Where did that come from? And I think it's a very clever way of writing, of both kind of showing you this is a horrible person, but you're gonna pity him, and you're gonna be sad, you're gonna cry sometimes. But I know, Johnny, that you are a gargantuan fan of this, so I'll let you ramble for a while.
Yeah, it's all right.
I should have seen that coming.
Yeah, no, it is. I think I need another. I've watched it twice all the way through before, but I haven't for a while. I think I rewatched it the second time before the last season came out, and then I've just watched this season. And I think I watched all the last season twice, and then I've only watched this newest season once. But I think it works on a lot of levels. I think the scripts are fantastic. The tension is palpable. I think the way it's directed to show the tension as well. The little cuts to people's facial expressions, and you can tell. So it's Jesse Armstrong, who historically in the UK has been a comedy writer, written a show called Peep Show that many of you may know, with David Mitchell and Robert Webb. And a lot of Peep Show is about showing people's facial expressions and showing it's about people's inner monologues. And actually, the way it's directed, I think Mark Mylod did a lot of the direction, but there's quite a few other big directors involved as well. And they've used the kind of that style of kind of showing people's faces and showing people's expressions to try and you're kind of trying to work out what they're thinking in their head. You're thinking, well, that face is not a face that's believing that person, or that face is really believing that person, or that face is worried and things, which is incredibly well done. They also do something I normally really hate, but I think it really works in this show. And again, to show those facial expressions and things, they do the kind of like crash zooms, where they will like jump into people's faces to show people's faces. And normally that's used in action movies like Bourne movies and stuff to make it seem more extreme. Whoa. But in this, actually, it's used very carefully to show people's facial expressions, to show someone texting on a phone, to show, you know, things that are really important to the plot. I think as well, it does a really good job of looking at that group of people in a way that I think I've ever seen on TV before, that probably gets it so accurately, where they are in just such another strata. They're just so wealthy. They have so much power and control. They have power over politics and power over the media and power over what the plebs, quote unquote, think. And stuff like so they don't think about things in terms of normal people do, like, how will this get me so I can pay my bill, or I can buy a nicer house, or I can go on a holiday. They just think of things in terms of power and how it works for them and how they win. They don't think, you know, in the same way that normal people think. They also don't think in the same way that normal people think that, oh, if I drive my car too fast down the road, I might hit a small child. To them, that's inconsequential. They don't give a shit about anyone else that's not in their immediate sphere. And you can tell that by the way they just don't give, even people that are very close to them, that they, you know, work with them every day, and they'll fire them, they'll drop them, they'll get rid of them like a hat because they say the wrong comment, or they're disposable to them to be thrown under the bus for their misdeeds and misdoings. I think it does an incredibly good job of showing that in a way that I don't think I've seen anything anymore, ever before, even. The acting is just incredible. I can't really fault any actor in it. They all seem very natural as well. No one seems forced. Every character's believable. Every character's well thought out. Again, going back to like just the little facial expressions and the little motions, that's all very, you know, very well done. And yeah, it's just a lot of Normally there's a show and you're like, it's really good apart from that one or two people, but I can't pick anyone out as bad. And it's quite hard to pick anyone out as the best, because obviously initially, what's his name? The main,
Brian
Kendall.
Cox? Jeremy Strong.
Jeremy Strong was kind of seen certainly as the best of the kids, but actually Sarah Snook, probably second, third season, is the best, the most interesting one. And I think towards the end, Kieran Culkin becomes
I think
the best.
Sneaky fourth season win there.
I think he's kind of very, like, a lot of emotion in him.
I think everything to do with the pre-grieving
exactly.
and then the grieving.
Yeah. Especially in the last couple of episodes, he's just incredibly believable. Obviously, Brian Cox is another strata, but then, he is just this beast kind of roaming around the show, and it's... but yeah, it's incredibly believable. And it's so interesting because in real life, he's just the nicest, cuddliest. I mean, he's a bit sweary and he's a bit kind of gruff, but he's also just a lovely guy. And he's such a different
interviews
character.
with him, it's fascinating to see.
Yeah, quite different. That's what if you listen to Kieran Culkin interviews, actually, he's like, people think he's like his character and he's just like a really nice family man with kids. And he's like, I'm not like that. Please don't think I'm like Kieran Smith. Please don't think I'm like
Roman.
Roman, yeah. And like you say, all these people that you think, I fucking hate these people, I wish they'd all die. But then the next minute you're feeling really sorry. Oh no, it's only because they've had a fucked up life that they're so mean and stuff. So you shouldn't. Again, I'm not always a big fan of this anti-hero stuff, but actually I think it works in this again as well. And then to throw on top of it, it's really fucking funny.
It is.
Really
that's what you get
funny
when you have comedy writers taking on a prestige drama.
I probably laugh as much at this, which is a prestige, like you say, a prestige drama, than I do the majority of comedy shows on, especially some of the things that Roman says, or some of the things that Greg says, or some of the situations they're put in.
A fantastic comic foil actor, and we're going to see him showing up in some indie comedies and things.
Absolutely. So yeah, no, I absolutely love it. I think it's up there with one of the best shows of all time. I respect the decision to finish it after 4 seasons. I think they did conclude the story. I could see another where they could have gone for another season, but actually, again, something that's one of the storylines of the last season is it's the second to last and the last season. There's a presidential campaign going on. Don't want to give too much away, but again, those kind of things are almost seen as like secondary to the family drama. They're going on in the background. They cause bits of drama, but actually, again, it's like inconsequential it's just about them winning at business again. And that's quite an interesting thing. So actually not finishing storylines off to do with things like that don't really matter in the greater thing. It's about tying up the family drama.
Exactly.
And that's actually something that's really interesting at the core of it, with all this extra stuff around, which is all interesting in itself. It's the family drama that really, and they tie it up so perfectly well. And I think most shows don't, and again, I don't want to go into the ending.
Yes.
But most shows, I personally don't think stick the endings. I think they either overwrite it or underwrite it or whatever. And I think this really actually hits the nail perfectly. I think every character, you kind of have an understanding of where they finished off in the pecking order.
Yes. I also think because Jesse Armstrong has said he's a fan of the prestige television that has come before, and you can see threads of that influences. So The Wire was very famous of having a main villain in Stringer Bell, played by Idris Elba, and then unceremoniously killing him off midway through season 3. Spoiler for The Wire there, but it's been out for 22 years. You don't have an excuse. And then introducing a far different villain for the last couple of seasons. And they do, without spoiling the actual events, a very similar thing here. And you can see threads like that here, or the way they have Brian Cox speak with a transatlantic accent, because Brian Cox, he can't not sound Scottish even when he's doing his American accent. Scotland comes through. So, and they allow.
Although my understanding actually was that was a
later
decision made later on, and not necessarily for that reason.
No,
he was meant to be more Canadian actually, but
from what I understand, he was more Canadian, and then they allowed him to be a bit more Scottish, which has there's similar things. A similar decision was made with Ian McShane in Deadwood, who couldn't quite get rid of his Manc. Original Manc accent in Deadwood. So they just allowed him to be originally from England, which wasn't the case with the real person. And just lots of little tiny touches that you go, oh, I wonder if they were inspired by this, because he's a fan. I think he's also a graduate of American literature. And there was an article released not so long ago that's from an American literature kind of bigwig, and said the most fascinating thing watching it from my point of view is I knew exactly where it was going, because I know the same sources that he knows, and I just wanted to see how well he was going to pull it off. So every episode I was rooting for Jesse Armstrong and crew to go, come on, do it as well as that great 19th century American book, or that's what have you. Yes, they did it. They pulled it off. But, it wasn't spoiled by the fact that, I know the beats that they're going to play, because I know the influences, because I also studied this stuff. It was, this person was just happy that they pulled it off as well as the things they were influenced by. And I think that's wonderful. It's both new, but it also is respectful of what's come before.
No, absolutely. I think I think that's it. I think it's just so cleverly written. There's so many beats in there that and I think that's another reason why it's a show that you can rewatch. There's a lot of stuff you may not notice one time watch, the first time watching it. And when you speak to people about things afterwards and you say, I noticed that, and obviously that mirrors that from season 1, and they're like, oh yeah, and then they'll say something like, I remember in season 2 when this happened, and it's a bit like that, and you're, oh yeah. And there's so much mirroring or foreshadowing and things in it, which is incredibly well done. No, I think it's I think it's a masterpiece, personally. I think it
Really great.
yeah, I think it's some of the best TV in a long time. And the fact it stuck the landing after over 4 seasons as well, because there's a lot of other stuff recently. There's been like Watchmen, great miniseries, or Last of Us, great miniseries. But this just, I think you have to give something a few seasons to judge whether they can keep momentum up. Yeah.
And I think miniseries have to be judged on their own merit because they're a different beast.
Exactly. I think that probably brings us to the
so.
end.
Otherwise, we'll just not
Succession.
stop talking about it.
No, just how great it is. So, why not buy some of these things? Hello, and welcome back. I hope you, in the break, have listened to some fun adverts and are getting ready to buy some things.
For a
maybe.
Snuck that in
Probably
there.
not, because it's
Box
probably
clever.
most of our people in the UK, but... Anyway, if you want to try and sneak that in every week, I'm going to not allow it. Rob, can you edit around that, please?
Trim around it.
Yeah, cut that out. Yeah. Anyway, number 2, we are talking about an old show. It is now, was it 98 the first season came out? 99, okay.
Yes.
So it came out just as the Bill Clinton regime was wrapping up. Is regime the right word? Administration, I think they say in
it
America.
Would be administration.
Regime sounds more like dictator.
It does, like Putin or something.
And yeah, it's The West Wing. Callum, take it away.
Okay, so The West Wing is about the fictional president at the time. He's been in office for a year, Josiah or Jed Bartlett, and the show follows the day-to-day machinations of his closest staff members as they try to unpick little problems that kind of flare up throughout the day. So probably the main 2 worth talking about, just so it's not an overly long plot description, is Josh Lyman, the deputy chief of staff. He's kind of the audience proxy for a lot of people because he's the one that became the bit of the breakout. He eventually got the big romantic plot line. He's sarcastic, he's sardonic, but he's a good guy who's trying to do the best that he can to serve for the president. You got Leo McGarry, who is the chief of staff, who is best friends with Jed Bartlett, and they've been working this thing together. And then you got various other people. So I think, like I said, I don't want to kind of overly do it. So I think the only kind of main other one to mention is Sam Seaborn, because he's played by Rob Lowe. And at the time, a big movie star showing up in a TV show like that was kind of seen not as...
2 of them.
Yeah, 2 of them, because you also have Martin Sheen as the president. It was kind of seen not as the thing to do, not as the done thing.
And I think at the time, was he not the highest paid person in TV?
I think he
they
was.
Were like... I think it was like $500,000 an episode.
Something crazy. And yeah, each episode deals with there'll be a problem that flares up. There'll be a few continuing plot lines. So in season 1, you have the concern of Jed's daughter dating Charlie Young, who is a young black man who is the president. I can't remember what they call him. Like he does all of his body man does all his kind of bits and pieces. Kind of fetches him and fetches other people if he's going into a meeting. A young black man, and which has this kind of undercurrent that runs throughout the season. There's a war that's kind of on the brink of breaking out between Pakistan and India, and there's various kind of bits and pieces that keep flaring up, but in the kind of each episode has a day-to-day problem, and then there'll be these few currents going through. So Johnny, the first season of The West Wing, what was it that you thought? Without saying it was all right, you're not allowed to use that phrase.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
Clever.
I have always liked The West Wing. Let's start with the negative first. I do think it feels dated now.
It absolutely does.
I think considering what's happened in the world of politics and also the world of TV, it feels dated. But also, it's still really enjoyable. So although you kind of almost like it's like looking at the world through a pair of rose-tinted glasses when everyone was still sensible, and even the people on the other side, you just have a big argument with them because you believed in different things.
That was a bang.
It was a bang. You just have an argument because you believed in different things, not just completely have mental people that you can't actually argue with in politics, which seems to be certainly on the far left and the far right at the minute, which everything seems to be quite polarised and extreme. And it was just a rosy, wonderful little world. And it's just quite nice to watch that. The last time I watched all of The West Wing was when Trump got elected. I was like, just give me President Butler.
Let him tell you something folksy about something like, oh, did you know that? And then he'll go on one of his rants.
Yeah, just, a learned nerd who just wants to get on with people and has morals and occasionally gets angry and occasionally thinks the wrong things, but at the end of the day makes the right decision. But no, the current affairs stuff, although they're not very current anymore, is very well done and very of its time. I'm actually now rewatching the second season, and there's quite a lot of stuff in there around getting kind of generic drugs for third world countries, particularly around AIDS and debt forgiveness and things like that, which are all things now that actually have been, I wouldn't say dealt with because there was always problems coming up with things like that, but they've actually done stuff about, and it's, so from that point of view, it's quite an interesting time capsule as well. Incredibly well acted. Everyone is very top-notch actors, and you have to be to keep up with an Aaron Sorkin script. The script is very fast-paced, very well written, overwritten at times, which is an Aaron Sorkin trait. It does sound like screenwriters talking to each other. Yeah. Again, this is a thing from the second season, but in the second season, there's an episode where it's the Sam Seaborn character, who is one of the two scriptwriters, along with Toby Ziegler. NASA have written this speech for the president to say when they're going to do this live thing with kids in schools. And he starts to read it, and he's like, can I just start rewriting this? And they're like, and the guy from NASA's offended, no. I've written this. It's fine. The only person who can tell me to rewrite this is the president. And then the president immediately starts reading it, and he's like, "Who wrote this?" He's like, "Oh, it was me, sir. Sam, can you tidy it up?" And then Sam immediately starts saying one, and it just sounds like a speech by a screenwriter.
Swells, and he delivers it. I remember that scene. He delivers it in a way that they do in television when you really want to be inspired by something.
But one sounded like, just poor,
yes.
Mid-level kind of writing for an email that goes around a company, and then his one's like something that someone would do it. Every episode has a speech in it that's worthy of the end of a $200 million action movie from The Hero. And it has that moment. So, yeah, it's definitely it's definitely overwritten at times, but then that's quite enjoyable. Certainly if you're like me, and I quite like wordy things. I like inner monologues. I like people talking. I like dialogue. So as long as it's done well, and actually I can be very critical of dialogue. Dan Brown, I look at you. So yeah. Callum, what do you think?
No, I think much the same. I will also front load with a flaw, just because it's best to do that with things you like that aren't perfect. This is of early television and early prestige television. They didn't expect you to binge it. They didn't expect a box set to come out, which was going to happen a couple of years after that, DVD box sets. And then years after that, streaming. At the time it was coming out, they would go, "Oh, that thing, it's not working. Just get rid of it. No one will notice. No one will ever talk about where that character went." But it does that thing that a lot of prestige television did at the time, where if a character wasn't working out, it's fine to get rid of a character who's not working out. They still do it today on television today, but what they'll do today is they'll make sure to write them out properly. They'll give them an ending. They'll make sure that character's given a send-off, even if they weren't popular. So to make sure that it narratively flows, because they know there'll be people watching 4 or 5 episodes a day on a rainy Sunday afternoon.
Or a hot Sunday like today.
Oh, on a hot Sunday like today, a really hot Sunday like today. So there's a character in season 1 who didn't work out, and you can tell she's not working out from the first episode. She just doesn't have the same thing that clicks with everyone else. And she's played by Moria Kelly. And I mean, the acting's fine. The writing for her just doesn't work. So by season 2, it's gone, never to be mentioned ever again. And that was an early television thing. And there's a few things plots of the week where things come up, they get resolved. And then the characters will make the exact same mistake the next week where, Josh, you shouldn't be so,
up your own
arse and hot-headed. And by the end of the episode, he'll be humbled And then the next episode will do exactly the same thing, and every character will kind of reset every episode, which is like television at the time. They weren't expecting you; they just wanted you to like that
I actually
episode.
think it got better at doing more arcs towards the end of its run.
Okay.
So I think that I feel like in the first season you get that a lot, where you get it's almost like Monster of the Week or Crime of the Week,
exactly.
but it's politics of the week. And then there's one or two overarching things that go
Yes,
through
like the
it.
India thing and the Charlie Young thing.
And also some of the things with like President's health and Leo's
Yes.
drinking and things like that. But they then become bigger and more. There's more kind of 2 and 3 part episodes and things. There's certainly longer arcs as it gets into later seasons. And I think obviously we watch the first season, and especially on like network shows, I always think first seasons there tends to be a lot of like finding that there's a character
Exactly,
that's completely
finding
pointless.
the show
and,
that is going to, because you can't know what's going to work or not.
and they didn't know how wildly popular it would be, and it became must-see TV.
Yes,
and it was
absolutely.
before the days, obviously, of
well, it was before the days
digital.
of must-see TV. Like, must-see TV wasn't really a thing unless you were the X-Files.
Well, yeah. But this was the next one. This was like the
This was
biggest
the next one.
drama at
Yeah,
the time
exactly.
on TV. But it was before DVRs. It was before people might have just about recorded it on VHS.
Yeah,
and
if you were
stuff.
lucky, and that was like 2 episodes maybe.
But by the end of its run, because I think was it 6 or 7 seasons?
It was 6 or 7, and by the point it finished, DVD was
DVRs
very
and
much
things.
a thing.
So they then started to have a bit more. I think that allowed them to do those
Yes.
longest episodes.
But of
and
course,
stuff.
just from my perspective, just because I haven't watched seasons 2 to 6, which is the ones I've seen, and I haven't seen season 7 at all for many a year. So I'm only kind of my opinion is only on this season, and this season has a little bit of that early television.
I agree with you. Yeah,
But
100%
otherwise,
agree.
the writing is great. What I found really sweet was that it started to feel like really good Spielberg, because the music is very John Williams-esque or Thomas Newman. So I started to feel it's like if Steven Spielberg, like you said, like the speech that comes at a $200 million movie, if Steven Spielberg wrote a president in a film, they probably look and sound very similar to Jed Bartlett. His staff would probably look and sound similar with similar dialogue. Because like we were saying earlier, at the end of the episode, they deliver a speech, music swells, do-do-do, and we're going to do this. Oh, we're going to fight for our country. And, you stand
because
up.
it's the right
The
thing to do.
And you... woo! You applaud, and it's just, it does make for very comfortable viewing. Like, Succession is objectively much better. I struggled to get, after about 2 to maybe 3 episodes of Succession per day, I was like, all right, that's enough backbiting and clawing of eyes and fighting and arguing. I just can't do any more today. With this, I could easily, there was a day it was like,
it's proper
another
bingeable.
episode,
Yeah,
another
yeah.
episode, another episode, another episode. It was just so sweet. And like you said, nice people who sometimes get things wrong, but more or less they're good people trying to do the best for their country. Oh man, especially right now, Donald Trump has just been indicted
For the second time.
for the second time.
This is a federal indictment. Yeah.
And a federal indictment, and in that landscape,
Boris Johnson.
and Boris Johnson is gone. And in that landscape, every time there's political strife in the world, people will be revisiting the West Wing. If you go to any clip of the West Wing, the comments will be from a point when something really horrible happened.
Politics was like this
Yeah.
now.
Exactly.
Just like I said.
Yeah, exactly. So it's sweet in all the ways it should be. It's overwritten, but nicely so for the most part. The flaws are, the kind of flaws that you expect for television that came out in '99. So they're forgivable. So really nothing really to fault it.
Yeah, fair enough. So I think that probably wraps up our reviews for the week.
I think so.
So Callum, first off, Succession. What's your scores on the doors?
Didn't expect to give it this because the first time I watched it, I was really struggling, but a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I am going to agree. I think it is probably the best show of this decade so far.
Yeah, probably.
Certainly over 4 episodes. Obviously, not everything from this decade is concluded, but actually there is quite a few things
There
now
have been
concluding.
a few shows have concluded almost in the same week as Succession did.
Yeah. It was quite a big week for conclusions,
It was.
actually. I suppose it was tail end of the last decade as well.
Yes.
But it wasn't. I think it was 2019, maybe the first
And
season.
it's certainly ingrained itself in the top 5% of television evs.
Yeah, exactly. Incredibly well acted. Yeah. If you haven't watched it, Go and watch it, and if you don't like it, you're an idiot.
Fix that soon.
And secondly, what would you give season 1 of West Wing?
Judging only season 1, I'd say, with a couple of minor niggles, a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, okay.
And it just works, and it's sweet. And it's sweet in just the right way, on the right side of saccharin. A few odds and ends where you go, oh, didn't like that, that character. Oh, and that thing. And what happened to that plot line? But otherwise, it just works.
I kind of think, for me, the first season is a bit clunky, and already into the second. Now I'm watching the second season, I feel it picking up. So, judging just the first season, I'm going to give it an 8, almost a 7, but an 8 out of 10. But I think it gets to a 9, and then it drops off again towards the end of it. But
and you're coming up to 2 Cathedrals, which is one of the best TV episodes ever in
one
TV
of the
episodes.
best speeches ever as well.
Yeah.
Old man yells at the god.
Yeah.
But no, it is. It's a very well done show. And you haven't, and like you say, it's very bingeable, very easy. I think that's another thing as well. I don't want a 10 out of 10 show to binge, because you want to savor it. And actually, with Succession, I've quite enjoyed watching it 1 episode a week. I think it's given me a week. It's almost like watching a really good movie, and then
I don't think I could have done more than 2 episodes per day. Sorry, because I was like, all right, I can't. There's too much shouting. Stop throwing sausages at Craig.
Whereas actually, like an 8 out of 10 show is nice and easy to binge. Like, I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another reason.
But you can let it go in one ear and out the other.
Yeah. I don't have to pay too much attention. But no, I really rate the West Wing. So yeah, I would say get through the first season. Well, you don't need to get through. You'll enjoy the first season.
It's still very good. I really liked it.
But then you'll really like it after that. But yeah, I think that wraps up this week. So thanks again for listening, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, fam.
Bye.
Bye.